Tu tautoko ana ngā mihi ngā karakia. Ko te tūmanako kātou, mana, manakitanga, ki runga i tātou katoa. Tēnā koutou i ngā tini mate. Nō reira, haere i ngā mate. Tātou te hunga, ora ki a tātou e tau nei, papatua nuku te whaia. Tēnā koe. Tēnei te mihi, atu ki ngā mana whenua o Wātia, o Waitaha, mō te koutou korowai atawhai ki runga i tēnei huhuinga. Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou, tēnā tātou. I ngā karangatanga mahi, aroha mai, maha e hari ana tēnei, te mihi, atu ki a koutou i runga, tonu nei, i ngā ahuatanga o tēnei kaupapa, manaki taonga, a whenua, a wai, a taiao ora. He kaupapa ngā nui whakaharahara, te hui, ngā tahi, kia kōrero, kia wānanga, mō ngā rautaki, wā e hanga ana, kia maha, ki ngā mahi ahu whenua. Ko wai tēnei, ko taranaki, ko whakatere ngā maunga, ko wai no Ngaro, ko waima ngā awa, ko Ngāruahine, ko Ngāpuhi ngā iwi, ko no Waipukurau ahau, no Gina ahau. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. I'd just like to acknowledge those who have passed on, the pioneers and the guardians of our past. I'd like to specifically acknowledge the mana whenua of this area for their hospitality to us all over the last few days. It is certainly a pleasure to be with you all today to focus on our future, our environment. So as New Zealanders, we value our freshwater. I think that's a given. Our rivers and our lakes and how we care for and use them are a fundamental part of who we are. Our recognition of the vital importance of freshwater, or te mana o te wai, is a central principle in the national direction on freshwater. A very simple way to think about the importance of water that has always resonated with me is the simple question, ko wai koe, or who are you? It is no mere coincidence that the word for who is why, and that the word for water is also why. So consider it another way. A pepeha starts with identifying your maunga. Why? Because your mountain catches and holds water, and then that eventually flows down to your awa or your moana, where it nourishes your people. So your iwi, your hapu, your marae and your communities, before it then evaporates and returns to the sky and the cycle begins again. Farmers understand this importance as well because they work the land every day. Our farmers are stewards of the land. And let's be honest, you wouldn't be a farmer if you didn't love what you were doing. It is hard work. They know that they rely on fresh water for their livelihoods, and farmers understand that they need to protect this resource. This simple acknowledgement that we all understand and deeply appreciate the significance of fresh water has genuinely been a cornerstone of the approach that we have taken in the development of the freshwater farm plan system. Because it has been about doing it together, in partnership. Which is why the focus on my speech today is on the approach that we've taken to design that system and how we've tried to go about the design of it in a different way. So let's just take a quick step back and remind ourselves, what problem are we actually trying to solve here? So it's of no news to you that it's become increasingly clear that our freshwater environment is under pressure from activities on the land and in the water and in a changing climate. While some of our freshwater bodies are in a reasonably healthy state, many have been and are continuing to be impacted by the effects of excess sediment, nutrients, pathogens and other contaminants from land. The effects of our activities on the freshwater environment has impacts on the many things that we value as individuals, communities and as a nation, such as being able to swim in, drink and gather mahinga kai without the risk of illness. Our freshwater environment is an interconnected system and it is affected by many pressures from human activities. And one of those activities is farming. Farming is the dominant activity on land, surrounding half the length of New Zealand's rivers. Many farmers and growers are committed to practices to improve the health of freshwater and have already made changes to the way that they manage their land and conduct their farming activities with this in mind. However, based on the current state and continuing decline of freshwater health in many places across the country, it is clear that the existing system has not supported farmers and growers to stop degradation or ultimately turn things around and improve the health of freshwater. Farmers and growers want to do the right thing, but they were telling us that the existing regulatory framework was not fit for purpose in many cases. They needed something that would allow them to plan for common sense actions that were appropriate for their locality, their landscape, and their farm. Achieving healthy freshwater requires regional councils to manage the effects of land use on freshwater. This is typically being done in rules and policies and regional plans and requiring resource consents for higher risk activities. And while in some cases these approaches are effective and efficient tools, the state of our freshwater bodies has shown that regional councils were struggling at times to manage the effects of human activity, including farming, on freshwater health using these traditional approaches. Farmers have been asking for an approach that allows a farm's unique circumstance to be considered when looking at how freshwater health can be protected and enhanced. A one-size-fits-all approach would not be fit for purpose for the unique set of circumstances. Now, we have seen farm environment plans and the like in place in different regions, and we knew that they were an effective environmental management tool. But without a consistent national framework and expectations, there were many different standards and approaches in place, resulting in different outcomes across farm types and regions. So it was based on these factors that the intent behind the design of the freshwater farm plan system has been to create one that is nationally consistent, but ultimately it is owned and implemented by regional councils, and then it is also able to be tailored to the individual circumstances of each farm across the motū. From the start, we knew we wanted to design the system alongside farmers and growers, iwi and hapu, regional councils, industry bodies, central government, everyone. We wanted to do it in partnership, and we wanted to talk to the people who were going to be impacted by the system, and we wanted to hear from them. Now, no doubt in my mind that the word consultation has a loaded meaning for many people and lots of different connotations. Certainly for our part, we did not want to be seen to be simply releasing a document, asking for some feedback, making some changes, and then just finalising it. We did not want this to be a passive process. We were clear from the start that the experience of farmers and growers, advisors and regulators who have already developed farm environmental plans would be integral to designing a process that would be both effective and workable for farmers and growers. So in our goal to create implementation-led policy, we started by user testing the freshwater farm plan system, or the process, on over 100 farms around the country. So this included dairy farms, so both cow and goat, sheep, beef, so hill country, rolling and flatland systems, arable, outdoor pig farms, mixed use farms, as well as a range of horticultural sites such as vegetables, apples, avocados, citrus, kiwi fruit, and also viticulture. And then throughout that process, we also made sure to visit, discuss these potential changes, and listen to Māori landowners and farmers. We conducted 2 rounds of this user testing. So the first round involved working directly with farmers and growers to test how that very first iteration that we'd designed would work in practice. The good news from that first round is that it was clear that there was general consensus that the proposed freshwater farm plans would allow farmers to tailor their plans to their specific set of circumstances. They liked that they would be able to be recognised for work that has already been done to manage risks to freshwater, and that where there was further work needed, that they could choose actions that were best suited to their farm. Much of the feedback gathered from farmers and growers focused on making the process easy to understand. So, and fair enough, many highlighted that they just wanted a clear approach that reduced duplication and that was framed by language and processes that they already understood. So based on these learnings and ahead of a second round of testing, we made a range of changes, including updating material and guidance for farmers and growers in order to reduce technical jargon and include some more information about the intent of catchment context and the risk identification process. The second round of testing was done as a Freshwater Farm Plan pilot program, and this was run in partnership with the Waikato, Tairāwhiti and Southland Regional Councils. So this pilot program involved end-to-end testing of the Freshwater Farm Plan system. So that included the development of catchment context information by regional councils, the Freshwater Farm Plan development process itself, and the certification and audit process. And the regional councils also tested this process with a sample of farmers and growers in their region. And it was through this second round of testing that, again, we learnt that on the whole, farmers found the process workable and sufficiently flexible for their circumstances. At this stage, some key changes were made based on that feedback. And so a good example of this is actually how we reconsidered how the guidance material and regulations would require farmers and growers to represent the use of catchment context information. So in the user testing and pilot program, we had asked farmers and growers to include a dedicated section where they outlined all the catchment context information that was relevant to their farm, but there was no requirement to or prompt to identify how this information specifically related to on-farm risk or an action that they were to undertake. So what this meant is that it had a tendency to dump all the catchment context information in one place, and then it wouldn't be referred to again in the development of identifying risks and selecting actions. So for us, there was no clear thread that kind of showed actually the process, how it intended, and how your catchment context directly related to how you then applied on-farm actions. So based on this, we redrafted our regulations and guidance to prompt that. And the intention behind this change really was to build that consideration of catchment context information more clearly into that risk and action process, and ultimately at the end of the day to make it easier for farmers and growers to be able to demonstrate how they've actually met the requirements to a certifier. So once that final round of system design change and decisions had been made, we gathered one final round of feedback. So we released an exposure draft of the regulations and accompanying guidance to a group of regional council and also industry stakeholders. And we used this final round of feedback to make the final changes and tweaks before we formally gazetted and the regulations and guidance was released in June of this year. So formally, we conducted 2 rounds of on-the-ground user testing plus a final round of feedback, but of course that misses that throughout the process we were in contact with a range of stakeholders, taking advice, and feedback, listening, and really just trying to make this an iterative and pragmatic approach to designing the system and the regulations. So the creation of a freshwater farm plan system that is nationally consistent but regionally led and flexible enough for individual farmers and growers recognises that there is much work to be done, but there are benefits in all of us approaching that together. Freshwater farm plans will provide this consistent framework, but they will also allow the flexibility for regional councils to consider their own catchment context and cultural values, their regional council plans, and their own community aspirations for freshwater health. They will work with existing farm plan initiatives and allow farmers and growers to develop solutions that are tailored to each farm in their surrounding area and their catchment. Over time, they will make a big contribution by enabling farmers to meet council freshwater rules in a way that is tailored to their farm and in the needs of their local catchment. Most importantly, farm plans will be implemented and enforced by regional councils, not by central government, not by us. We oversee the national implementation of the regulatory framework, but councils are responsible for taking ownership of this system at a regional level. So this includes developing and providing that catchment context information. They appoint and train certifiers and auditors, who of course are then ensuring that individual freshwater farm plans are fit for purpose and being implemented as intended. They are developing and implementing a compliance, monitoring and enforcement approach. And then, of course, the actual freshwater farm plan will be developed and owned by farmers themselves. The certifier and auditor workforce will be appointed to the regional councils in which they wish to work, and the regional councils do that. But it's not intended that they be regional council employees. So they will work under private service agreements with farmers and growers, guided by these national level competencies and professional standards that we've put in place to ensure consistency. But they will be, those competencies also then apply at a regional level, because of course the regional councils are designing a regional package that is specific and tailored to their particular region. So they will help farmers act practically to reduce farm impacts on freshwater and freshwater ecosystems. And certainly our hope is that over time, freshwater farm plans will be increasingly relied on, reducing the need for consents and hard and fast rules as appropriate. So I guess the question, certainly for us at the moment, is what's next? So we're already full swing into implementation. Southland and Waikato have now both appointed their first certifiers, or I think just there. Horizons, Otago and West Coast are well into the planning stages, and freshwater farm plans will be rolling out in those regions from early 2024. We've also now heard from our remaining councils about their approach to the rollout of freshwater farm plans, and we're working closely with them to make sure that we get this squared away in a way that works for them, and so we can provide as much clarity on timeframes as early as possible to allow as much time as possible to actually work through what the implementation looks like for their particular region. In this continued spirit of collaboration, we have been seeing some excellent examples of partnering occurring with farmer-led groups and industry. So a good example of this is the West Coast Focus Farm Trust, who is partnering with industry and gaining financial support from our colleagues at MPI to deliver resources and support for farmers on the West Coast to develop freshwater farm plans. This project is also working closely with the West Coast Regional Council to engage with farmer groups as those regulations are being rolled out. So, we really are seeing, this is a really good example on the West Coast of actually seeing a whole range of partners and stakeholders all working together and leveraging off their skill set and their strengths in order to implement this system. We've seen in Southland that they're implementing their freshwater farm plan regulations at place and in line with their own community values and objectives. They've taken full advantage of their strong partnership with Te Ao Marama to ensure that all values are considered and implemented through their catchment context and cultural values and the training aspects for their region for the freshwater farm plan system. We've seen the regional sector come together through Te Uru Kahika. Reference groups are enabling strong sharing of implementation opportunities across councils. The sharing of learnings, knowledge and consistency of approach certainly supports all councils, and from our point of view, that central and regional and local government partnership. And certainly for our part, we are really lucky to enjoy a strong partnership ourselves with our Te Uru Kahika colleagues who have been really integral to the progress that we've seen so far, and I have no doubt will continue to have. For our part, we continue to put a lot of effort and do what we can to support existing providers of industry assurance plans and farm environment plans to align their processes, requirements and templates with the freshwater farm plan requirements. I have a whole team every week who are working on this, and they're meeting and discussing and workshopping to ensure that we make that as easy as possible and we provide as much support as possible for that. And what that will mean is that in many cases, farmers and growers who have existing plans under one of these programs, they'll be able to avoid duplication and they'll be able to continue with that existing plan provider. As a team, we've taken great pride in the relationships that we've built so far, and certainly not shying away from the sometimes tough but certainly needed conversations across industry and regional councils and with tangata whenua. And we're certainly appreciating those strong relationships that we've forged. And certainly for me, I've just a disclaimer, I've been in this role now for 2 months, and certainly just in that space of time, I've been so impressed with my ability to forge relationships and pick up the phone and talk to people, and for them to have really constructive conversations with me and give me some feedback and advice, which I certainly am taking on board, and I know that my team does the same thing. And I feel like we've got real momentum and alignment across all sectors on this. Certainly, the rural sector, Māori, regional councils, industry, and the community organisations that we see on the ground, we're all pretty aligned in wanting to make this work. And so certainly from our point of view, we're confident that if we continue to approach this next phase of implementation openly and in the same spirit that we've kind of got to this point in, we will certainly continue to have great success. So with that, ngā mihi. Thank you.
People have been busy and there are a large number of questions.
Be kind.
So if we can start with the most popular one, start with the top, please. That would be, if you can read it okay from there.
Yes, no, certainly.
Maybe reflected, no, it's not reflected.
It's all right, I shall turn my head. Many feel that the expectation of the community... Right, yeah. So what I would probably say to that is, do we have a plan B? Like we're always thinking, I wouldn't say we have a plan A over here and there's a whole stark plan B over here, but we certainly have a whole lot of plans in place and ideas about how we can support and put things in place where we're seeing issues. So one of the big things for us is, making sure that we're being regularly monitoring and understanding what the uptake is so far. So that's probably the first point to say. And the importance of that means that, the ability for us to anticipate where some of the issues are is really important. So from the start we've been clear that if we don't have any data in place to help us actually kind of fulfil our role as kind of monitors and stewards of the system, then we're not going to be able to pick up these sorts of issues. So that's probably the first bit. The second bit to that as well is we've got a lot of support and a lot of support that will be coming online that will be specifically tailored to certain regions and catchments about actually trying to draw in some of those professionals and also some of the people who potentially you might not think who might not automatically be like, yes, I want to join this workforce, but actually once we're able to kind of target them and talk to them a little bit about what it involves and actually how the expertise can be of use, we think we've got a pretty good plan in place about how we can draw them in. So I guess, whether you call that a plan A or a plan B, I'm not sure, but we've certainly got a lot of things and a lot of things already in place and a lot of things in train to ensure that we are, anticipating and hopefully picking up any issues well in advance that we can then certainly resolve with our partners. So I'm going to be honest with you, probably not, and the reason why is literally just because we're in a caretaker government at the moment, and so there are a few things that are still subject to ministerial decision that I can't really comment on. But what I would say is this: it's things like how we, at a general level, it's things like how we target and promote through non-traditional channels, and so I say non-traditional. It's like let's be honest, central government, we can have a tendency to think, a banner at the bottom of a website is all we're going to need to do. That's not what we're going to be doing. So we're going to be actually specifically going out there and targeting certain groups, certain businesses already in place, and actually going and talking to them. We have engagement plans in place and potentially a little bit of additional support subject to ministerial decision that hopefully we'll get a little bit of clarity on the next couple of months. And certainly for our place, it's a funny place to be in. Well, not a funny place, but sort of a reasonably typical place to be in as a public servant, as a central government public servant over the last couple of months. We're continuing with a lot of BAU, but we kind of have this package and train that we just need to kind of re-seek additional decision or kind of ensure we definitely got that ministerial direction on. So apologies that I can't give you more detail, but I can assure you that we have stuff in place, but it's just, not necessarily appropriate that I'm able to talk about that in specifics at this time.
Popular one at the top.
Will consultants be regulated in the sense of pricing? Is that I'm going to assume that's what this is about, right? Regulation on pricing. So the first answer is no, but probably the second answer to that is it's not like we're just going to, open slather, let things happen. Certainly the intent isn't that suddenly we're going to see these huge costs sort of start popping up. So kind of falling back on that comment I made earlier about monitoring and data in the system. So we've got a few kind of indicators and things in place that we're hoping will allow us pick up these sorts of issues so that we can actually dig into it, because certainly it's not the intention of the system to create something that's really unaffordable to people. And from our own modelling, it shouldn't be. But of course, when you're implementing a system that's brand new, you never kind of know what things are gonna do. So from a tight, have we written regulations to put in place some kind of pricing scheme or upper limits or anything like that? No, we haven't.
Maybe the next one.
That is a good question. So there's probably a couple of answers to that. If I'm honest, environmental, and this is always a tension, right? Like I've worked in council, and I certainly remember like getting frustrated because I felt like central government regulations and legislation would come down the line, and I'd be like, how am I going to implement this? So there's two parts to this, right? There is so from a principled base, regional councils are there to do to manage and regulate and monitor our environment. This is part of the role of regional councils. So it's not something brand new that's out of scope or anything like that. So I would say, just keeping that in mind. And then, but the other part is no, we're not going to suddenly just throw a whole bunch of things on you and say, hey, have fun. That would be an awful thing to do, and not remotely in the spirit of partnership, in line with the speech I've just talked about. So when we think about council funding, we're not thinking about, when we think about funding and supporting the system, we're not thinking about we're going to give a bucket of money to each regional council in order to do this. We're thinking about the system as the whole. So for instance, we have funding coming online that is targeting farmers and growers and the support that we need to provide them. We have some funding that is coming online or that we have to support regional councils. So a good example of this is, so for West Coast Regional Council, we've been able to, while we might not have baseline funding to go and provide to our regional council colleagues, we've been able to provide our own staff to actually work half-time, kind of with a West Coast Regional Council hat on in order to support them to actually do this implementation. So we have a lot of flex in that sense, but if I was strictly saying I'm going to go and give X amount to certain regional councils, then no, that's certainly not the case. But for us, we're thinking at a system level about how we kind of identify certain gaps in the system as a whole, and the funding will be distributed along those lines where we have it.
And perhaps the last question is
This one here?
Yeah.
Oh, that one. I think that's the one I just... Yeah, I just answered that one. What proportion of freshwater farm plans? So I'm not sure if, and my staff might be able to correct me on this, because I'm not aware whether or not we've actually sat down and kind of, attempted to, decide what proportion we think will do X, Y, or Z. We have some plans in place that will actually specifically target this. So we've got some stuff, and actually you might have seen, I can talk about this openly, we've got some RFSs out at the moment, which is actually about, we call it farmer learning solutions. So it's actually about being able to support our farmers to actually create these plans themselves, so not to have to go out and pay someone to do it. And so we have a couple of other things like that in train as well that are specifically targeted at being able to assist and support farmers to provide, to create these themselves. There's also as well, like there's nothing stopping farmers, so say at a sub-catchment level or catchment level, actually coming together, and for things that are, so common risks, there's nothing that's also stopping them coming together and thinking about how they might be able to share costs across the board in terms of those areas that might be relevant to all of their farms in that catchment area. So, certainly we have a part to play in ensuring that those sorts of options are clear and available, and that people understand that they can do things like that as well. and regional councils, and certainly through funding through catchment groups, etc. I would hope and expect that over the next few months that we can kind of increase our engagement on that front and make that a little bit clearer, I suppose, about the opportunities there.
And I'm going to be really cruel. That last question, can you have a quick stab at that with a short response?
To check if new rules duplicate activities that can be readily managed. So if new regional plan rules duplicate activities, is that what we're, yeah? There's not any intent to. It's not our, we're there to support and review if people want us to, but it's not, our intention that we would. And I certainly wouldn't see it as a sort of as a role for us as a team, but probably open point. It's not something I would be, I'd be there to support, and our team would be there to support as appropriate. But I wouldn't be, MFA wouldn't coming in and create an expectation that you provide your regional plans so we can review them. But we're certainly there to do what we can and to support and facilitate as much as possible for those who want it.
I think we'll call it to a close, and thank you for all your comprehensive answers to these questions, and thank you for the questions. So you'll know now how it works. Get in early, and then the presenters can get a chance to answer these tough questions. So thank you very much,
Thank
Gina.
you.